When I walked through the front door at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, my scrubs still smelled like antiseptic and panic. I had just performed compressions on a man who insisted he was just tired, even as his lips turned a worrying shade of blue. The ER had been packed, the trauma pager wouldn't stop chirping, and I had gone 12 hours without food, water, or even a bathroom break. But none of that hit me as hard as seeing Abby's boots by the door. At first, I thought someone was bleeding. Why else would she be home? Her coat was slung over the armrest like she'd collapsed mid-step, and her overnight bag, carefully packed with way too much excitement, was zipped and untouched. I rounded the corner into the living room, and there she was, curled on the couch like a discarded blanket, tense, guarded, half asleep in the way kids sleep when they don't trust their environment. "Abby?" I said, voice rough from hours of barking orders and bad coffee. Her eyes opened instantly, no grogginess. "Hey," she said and gave me a small smile, wobbly, rehearsed. "You're home late." "Why are you home?" I asked. She sat up slowly, then shrugged. "They said there wasn't room." "Room?" I blinked. "Room where?" "At the table." Her voice cracked halfway through and she swallowed hard, trying to play it cool. "Grandma said she wasn't expecting me. Too many people already." She looked stressed. I think I made it worse just by showing up. The words didn't register immediately. My brain, still wired for trauma codes and IV orders, couldn't parse the logic. "You got there on time?" "Yeah, early even. I thought, to help." I stared at her. She looked down at her lap, tracing a seam in her jeans. "She said there wasn't a bed left either," Abby added after a moment. "Said they didn't want me driving back late, but didn't know where else to put me. Did anyone offer to drive you home?" She shook her head. "Did you eat?" I asked, already dreading the answer. She shrugged again, but this time her shoulders tensed. Lily was in my seat. Grandpa was laughing at her jokes like she was the second coming. No one really looked at me. Then softer, almost to herself, "I made toast." I turned and saw it, sitting on a paper towel next to the sink. One slice, slightly bent, a single half banana next to it like a garnish for misery. "That's what you had for dinner?" I said, voice sharp. "I wasn't hungry anyway," she lied. I knew that lie. I'd worn it most of my life. That's when her eyes started to shimmer. She looked up at the ceiling, blinking hard, bit her lip like she could chew her way out of crying. "They made it seem like I was the one being rude," she whispered, "like showing up was the problem." Her voice trembled again, and this time she couldn't hold it back. The tears came slow and steady, like a faucet no one fixed. "I was gonna bring a pie," she added, wiping her cheek with her sleeve. "But I figured they'd have enough food." I sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her narrow shoulders. She leaned into me without hesitation, like she'd been holding herself upright out of sheer pride. After a while, she said, "I know they don't like you, but I thought I was just the kid, just neutral." I didn't reply. Because what was I supposed to say? That she was wrong? She wasn't. They didn't say it with slurs or screams. They said it with shrugs, with empty chairs, with letting a 16-year-old drive herself home in the dark after handing her a plate of nothing. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, still wearing the sweater my mother once said she liked, I sat alone in the kitchen. Her bag was by the door, untouched. I opened it. Inside were cookies Abby had made herself, labeled with each cousin's name. She'd even packed the nice tin, the one she used last year. I opened the fridge. There was nothing special there. No backup ham, no mashed potatoes. Why would there be? We trusted them. And that's what burned the most. Not the cold toast or the fact she hadn't eaten. Not even the lonely drive home. What burned was that they looked her in the eye, this sweet, awkward, brave girl who showed up on time with cookies and a smile, and told her, "There's no room." They didn't mean space. They meant not you. The next morning, my husband came home from his shift. Abby was still asleep. I told him everything. He stood silent for a long time, then asked, "So, What do we do now? I didn't answer, not out loud, but I already knew. There's a difference between turning the other cheek and turning away your own granddaughter on Christmas Eve. They'd chosen the latter. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to act. At 6:12 a.m., I placed a sealed envelope against my parents' front door. Inside was clarity, written in firm legalese and silent fury. I walked back to the car without knocking. We pulled away before they could open it. But I still remember the scream that came from the porch 30 seconds later. It echoed through the frosty air like a fire alarm. "Frank, get out here! She's throwing us out!" My husband reached for my hand. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in 38 years, I wasn't going to apologize for protecting my own. If you've ever been left out after giving your all, type 1. I was reviewing a trauma intake report when I got the text from my mother. "Your sister needs your help. Call her." No hello, no punctuation, just the same clipped tone she'd always used when she wanted something without saying she wanted something. I ignored it for an hour, buried myself in back-to-back consults and a lunch I didn't eat. Then I opened the message Janelle had sent me the day before. A photo of Lily, her teenage daughter, smiling in front of a science fair poster that clearly wasn't her work. She was holding a certificate. Under it, a single line. "She got into the STEM summit. Just like you, huh?" I stared at the screen. Then the next message hit. "It's $1,200 for the full program. Life-changing opportunity. You of all people get it." That's where she lost me. Not because I didn't believe in education, not because I didn't want Lily to thrive, but because Abby had never asked. Abby, who made honor roll every semester. Abby, who built her own telescope last summer from scrap parts. Abby, who made her own lunch since 5th grade and never once demanded more than we could give. Janelle didn't want advice. She didn't want a suggestion for financial aid or a scholarship. She wanted a blank check, wrapped in guilt. I typed slowly, then backspaced, then typed again. "Janelle, I'm proud of Lily. I really am. But I'm already covering Mom and Dad's mortgage, their prescriptions, and the dental bills they can't afford. I can't fund everything. Maybe you can talk to the program about payment plans?" Her reply came within 5 minutes. "Wow, must be nice to have everything and still be stingy." Then another. "She's your niece, Kate. You're just bitter because Lily's actually going places." I dropped the phone on my desk and stared at the wall. I'd heard the same script before. Different cast, same production. When I got my scholarship, my mother had said nothing. No hug, no card. She just asked, "Do you think you'll find a man who doesn't mind that?" When I matched into my residency, my father asked, "You still gonna be able to come home for the holidays, or are you too fancy now?" When I bought them a house, a full paid-off 2-bedroom in a quiet suburb, they didn't thank me. My mom walked through it, nodded once, and said, "Well, it's not granite counters, but it'll do." They never missed a moment to make me feel like a burden wearing a lab coat. And now, they were using my success as an ATM, and punishing me the second I said no. The day after Abby was turned away on Christmas Eve, I didn't pick up a single call. They came in waves, my mother, my father, Janelle. Then cousins I hadn't spoken to in 5 years suddenly had opinions. Aunt Margie sent a voice memo filled with passive-aggressive prayers. One cousin wrote, "You only get one mom." Yes. And somehow I'd ended up with 2 narcissists and a press manager. By the 3rd day, I stopped opening messages altogether, but it was Abby's silence that gutted me the most. She didn't ask what came next, didn't complain. She just existed, studied, read, put on noise-canceling headphones and pretended the world outside didn't sting. We didn't talk about the toast again. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning, I opened my email and saw the subject line, "Internal promotion results, trauma depth." I clicked. Heart rate steady, expectations low, and there it was. The job I had applied for, lead physician, trauma response, had gone to Dr. Lewis. A man with 5 fewer years of experience, no publications, and a reputation for flirting with board members' wives at fundraisers. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just cold. The kind of cold you get when it all starts to connect. When you realize you're not just underappreciated in your family, you're invisible everywhere. They never see the late nights, the missed birthdays, the double shifts, the toast. They just see what you didn't give them. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and sighed. Janelle, still dressed like Christmas never ended, red fleece sweater, messy bun, coffee cup in one hand, and a performance in the other. I opened the door. Barely. She smiled. Can we talk? I crossed my arms. About what? How my bitterness is ruining Lily's future? She had the decency to wince. Look, she said, Mom and Dad, they're not taking this well. I leaned against the frame. Not my problem. They're your parents, Kate. No, I said, calm as glass. They were Abby's grandparents, and they made her eat toast while 28 people sat around a table pretending she didn't exist. Janelle's face fell. It wasn't personal. That's exactly what it was. She paused. They don't know how to say sorry. They had 16 years, she exhaled. Look, could you at least help find them a rental? Just something small? Maybe cosign? I blinked. You want me to financially support the people who humiliated my daughter so publicly they sent a message without saying a word? She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That night, Abby sat beside me on the couch, laptop open on her knees. She was editing a project for school, something about planetary alignment. I'm applying to that leadership summit, she said casually. I turned. You are? She nodded. I'm using the money Grandma said didn't exist for me. I blinked. She added. I figured if I can't get a seat at their table, I might as well build my own. I didn't cry, not until she left the room. They took everything I gave and resented me for the parts I kept. But I wasn't playing that game anymore, and they had no idea what I was planning next. If you've ever been punished for setting boundaries, type 2. The HR director leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and said, You're overreacting, Dr. Emerson. The words sat heavy in the air, like acid in a wound. I had just spent the last 20 minutes presenting documented proof that Dr. Lewis, my colleague and the man who'd taken the trauma lead job I was more qualified for, had falsified shift reports, exaggerated case involvement, and used my trauma notes under his own credentials in a presentation to the board. I had timestamps, mismatched login data, even a message from a nurse who overheard him brag about making the numbers look right. And her response? Overreacting. I smiled politely. The kind of smile you practice after years of being told your facts are emotions. Noted, I said, then stood. I'll let legal handle it. Her eyebrows twitched. That was the moment I knew I'd finally stopped asking for space and started taking it. That same afternoon, my lawyer called. They still haven't moved, he said, flipping through papers I could hear rustling through the phone. We're at day 49 of 60. You want to proceed? I looked out the window. Abby was in the backyard, kneeling in the grass, painting the edges of a planter she built from scrap wood. Her headphones were in. Her face was calm. Yes, I said. I want to proceed. They had torn up the first eviction notice like it was a joke, a tantrum, a bluff. They didn't realize that when I folded that letter and slid it under their door, it wasn't an act of cruelty. It was a moment of clarity, a line in the sand. I had bought the house, paid the mortgage, covered the taxes. I'd spent the last 7 years pretending that helping didn't mean being taken for granted. And when I finally set a limit, they treated me like I'd betrayed them. But this wasn't betrayal, it was accountability. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Aunt Elaine. She was the nice aunt, the one who sent birthday cards and signed them "Love from both of us," even though I hadn't spoken to Uncle Ray in over a decade. Kate, she said in that too soft tone people use when they're pretending they aren't picking sides. I just want to talk. I'm stopping by tomorrow, okay? Please don't shut the door on me. I didn't. I let her in, made tea. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked around like she was visiting a museum she didn't know how to appreciate. It just doesn't sound like you, she said after the second sip. What doesn't? Throwing your parents out over what happened on Christmas. I mean, yes, it was wrong, but you evicted them. I looked at her, calmly. I didn't throw them out over a dinner. I removed them from a home they never appreciated, after a lifetime of using me and treating my daughter like furniture. She flinched. Kate, that's not fair. They made her eat toast, Elaine, while 28 people sat at a table. She made cookies, she brought gifts, and they turned her away like a stray animal. Elaine blinked. I didn't know. They didn't tell you, I corrected. There was silence then, a long, truthful one. When she left, she hugged me, lightly, not with warmth, more like guilt. On day 56, the lawyer called again. They've hired someone to challenge the notice, he said. Not a real case, just noise, delay tactics, but it won't work. Good, I said. List the house. That same afternoon, I put it on the market, reasonably priced. I wasn't trying to make a statement with money, I just wanted it over. A buyer made an offer within 3 days, a young couple, newly married, expecting their first child. They wanted vacant possession. I'll make sure it's done, I said. Clean handoff, no ghosts. No. Day 60 came. I didn't show up. I didn't need to. The eviction was handled through proper channels. The buyers handled the logistics. I heard later it wasn't pretty. Raised voices, tears, accusations. Janelle took them in. Of course she did. She always loved cosplaying the good daughter. Gave her an excuse to gossip with the cousins about how I'd snapped. Like this was all about a seat at a table and not years of being used, mocked, and discarded. But the honeymoon didn't last. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my door. No smile, no mug of coffee. Just bloodshot eyes and a wild bun of frizzed hair. I can't do it, she said, skipping hello. They're impossible. I raised an eyebrow. They argue nonstop. Mom says my living room's too small. Dad says my kids are too loud. They refuse to share a bathroom. I'm going insane. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. They need a rental, she said. Can you at least help with that? Maybe just enough for a deposit? I didn't answer right away. Then I said slowly, You watched Abby get turned away on Christmas Eve. You said nothing. That was your choice. I tilted my head. This is mine. She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned and walked away. They landed in a 2-bedroom rental with warped linoleum, 1 broken heater, and a front step that slanted like a shrug. Gone were the vacations, the cruise brochures, the dinner parties. They told everyone I had cut them off without warning. But I had documents. I quietly sent every uncle, cousin, and mutual contact copies of bills, timestamps, eviction letters, the loan paperwork. I let the truth do what decades of denial never could. Responses were quiet. One cousin sent back, "Wow." Another just replied with a single emoji. No one came rushing to save them, and I didn't lose sleep. One evening, Abby and I sat on the back porch sipping iced tea. She was glowing, finally applying to a college program she chose, not one anyone pushed. You know, she said, I don't miss them. Me either. Then she added, I think they'll text again. They always do, I said. But I'd made my choice. They said there wasn't room for Abby. Now there's no room in our lives for cruelty, or manipulation, or entitlement disguised as family values. If you've ever had to protect your peace from the people who raised you, type 3. I was halfway through a patient chart when the voicemail pinged. Unknown number. I tapped it open, not thinking. Hope you're proud of what you've done. That was it. No name, no explanation. But the voice, my mother's, sharpened into something cold and final like a blade wrapped in silk. I stared at the screen for a second, then deleted it without even saving the transcript. They were still trying to claim victimhood, still pretending like I was the one who burned the bridge, when they had poured the gasoline and struck the match years ago, and I was finally done standing in the smoke. 2 weeks after the sale closed, I received the wire confirmation. The house I had bought for them, paid off for them, protected for them, it was officially no longer mine, or theirs, just gone. The money was substantial, but not life-changing. It wasn't about wealth, it was about weight. A burden I had carried for too long, disguised as family duty. I transferred part of it to Abby's education fund. She'd been accepted into a selective design and engineering program out of state, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate to say yes. "Are you sure?" she had asked when I told her I'd cover everything: tuition, housing, travel. I looked at her across the breakfast table. "You were sure when you brought cookies to people who didn't deserve them. I think I can handle a dorm deposit." Meanwhile, Janelle had washed her hands of them. The rental got too tight, too noisy, too full of the same passive-aggressive comments she used to defend. She didn't call me to say she'd kicked them out. I heard from a neighbor my parents had ended up in a low-income senior complex across town. 2 rooms, yellowing blinds, a door that stuck when it rained. The kind of place you land when all your bridges are ash and no one's left to sweep it up. They started working the extended family circuit again, reaching out to anyone who'd listen, spinning stories of betrayal and heartlessness. Kate threw us out. She's unstable. She always thought she was better than us. But this time the story didn't land. Too many people had seen the paperwork. Too many had seen Abby's face that night. And I had stopped explaining. Back at the hospital, the internal review concluded. Dr. Lewis, the man who doctored his way into the trauma lead, was placed on administrative leave. HR never issued a public statement, but word spreads faster than policy. They offered me the job, a promotion, better pay, more responsibility. I turned it down. "I'm not interested in stepping into a broken system with a new nameplate," I told the department head. "I'd rather build something from scratch, on my terms." That night, I found myself sitting across from Abby at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from our house. She was sketching something, probably for one of her classes. Her hair was up, her hands ink-stained. "You're calm these days," I said. She looked up, smiled. "You too." I stirred my tea, then asked gently, "Do you miss them?" She thought for a moment. "I miss the idea of them, but I don't miss them." I nodded. Same. There was no anger anymore, just space. Space we had created by force, yes, but also by choice. A few days later, a letter arrived, handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the cramped all-caps handwriting immediately. Inside were 3 folded sheets and a photograph. The picture was of me at age 8, holding a school science trophy, beaming. Abby had never seen it before. I passed it to her, then unfolded the letter. It started with the words, "You've changed," and ended with, "You'll regret this." No apology, no reflection, just a last-ditch attempt to tether me back to guilt. Abby read the note silently, then pushed it away. "You know," she said, "there's a version of us they'll never accept, but it's the version that saved us." I didn't write back. I didn't send money. I didn't attend the cousin's wedding they tried to use as a reunion trap. And I didn't cry when someone texted me a photo of my parents' building, now with a foreclosure sign taped to the door. You can only pretend not to see the rot for so long before it starts showing through the walls. One Sunday, I found Abby sitting on the porch, staring at the sky. "I'm applying for the innovation grant," she said. "It's competitive. They only pick 10 nationwide." "You'll get it," I said. She smiled. "I'm not scared anymore. Not of asking for what I want, not of being told no." And that's when it hit me. That peace wasn't something we were owed. It was something we built, with hard choices, with hard stops, with silence where apologies should have been. They said there was no room for Abby. Now there's no room in our lives for shame disguised as love or control packaged as family tradition. We chose peace, and we're keeping it. If you've ever had to walk away from people you love to protect the person you're becoming, type 4.